when the Duchess met the Bravo host, Meghan Markle versus Andy Cohen. Would you let someone who publicly humiliated you back into your home? Meghan Markle's sharp retort silenced the Bravo studio and set the tone for one of the most intense interviews in recent television. The evening began like any other late-night show. The familiar glow of Bravo's Watch What Happens Live lit up the set as Andy Cohen shuffled his note cards with a casual grin. The audience buzzed with curiosity, sensing that this would be no ordinary conversation. Then came the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a very special guest. She's been making headlines around the world. Please welcome the Duchess of Sussex herself, Meghan Markle. The applause was polite, but not electric. Meghan stepped onto the stage in a sleek black blazer and tailored trousers, her posture poised, her stride deliberate. She smiled warmly enough for the cameras, but something about the expression seemed practiced, controlled. "Thrilled to be here," she declared, though the word landed with the polish of a press release rather than genuine excitement. Andy noticed. So did the viewers. A polite beginning with tension. Beneath Cohen began lightly, cocktail in hand. "So, Meghan, how's life in California? You and Harry have been settling in?" Her reply came quickly, edged with a subtle defensiveness. "Life's wonderful. We don't really settle, Andy. We create, we build." A polite chuckle rippled through the audience, though it carried more tension than warmth. When Andy pressed about her marriage, always a tabloid favourite, Meghan's smile tightened. "We're perfect," she said firmly. "Unlike the constant inventions in the press, we have a strong marriage. People should stop wasting their time on lies." The room shifted slightly. Her tone, though confident, came off as curt. Cohen, unfazed, nodded. "Of course. But curiosity is the price of fame, right?" Meghan's reply carried more heat. "Curiosity is one thing. Invasion is another. People think they're entitled to every detail of my life, my marriage, my children. It's absurd." The moment that changed the atmosphere. The exchange took a sharper turn when Cohen mentioned her father, who has often spoken to the press. "Do you think there's any chance of reconciliation there?" he asked carefully. For the first time, Meghan's polished smile cracked. Her voice hardened. "Andy, my father has sold lies to tabloids for years. He chose publicity over family. That chapter is closed." The audience murmured, sensing the rising tension. Cohen leaned forward gently. "So, no possibility of him meeting Archie and Lilibet?" Her eyes flashed. "I don't see why I should reward betrayal. Would you let someone who publicly humiliated you back into your home?" "Exactly. Let's not play naive." The room fell silent. The warmth of the studio lights seemed dim as the air thickened with discomfort. Andy Cohen stayed calm, his voice measured. "I hear you. But some would argue family ties are unique, worth preserving." Context and comparison. This exchange wasn't just another celebrity interview. It was a collision of two different approaches to public life. Meghan Markle, guarded and fiercely protective of her personal boundaries, against Andy Cohen, a host known for pressing gently but persistently until his guests reveal more than they intend. In many ways, the moment echoed past interviews of high-profile royals. Diana's candid revelations to the BBC in the 1990s come to mind, where the personal collides with the public, and private pain becomes a matter of global debate. Clash on Bravo. Meghan Markle pushes back against Andy Cohen. "People can debate forever, but they'll never know what it's like to live my life. And I'm exhausted by the pretense that they do." The words landed hard, Meghan Markle's voice firm, almost cutting. Sitting across from her, Andy Cohen raised his glass with deliberate calm, hiding the glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. He had spotted the shift. The Duchess's composure was beginning to fray. "Royal life under the microscope." Cohen pivoted. "Let's go back to the beginning, when you entered the royal family. You once described it as overwhelming. Some would say you weren't ready for that world." Meghan let out a low, sharp laugh. prepared? You can't prepare for entering a centuries-old institution clinging to outdated traditions. It was rigid, confining, suffocating, and despite that, I adapted better than anyone could have expected. Her words, delivered with absolute certainty, carried an undertone of superiority that did not escape either the audience or Cohen. He pressed further. But the British public never truly welcomed you. Why do you think that happened? Meghan's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. Because I didn't conform. I was different. I questioned the system. I refused to bow and scrape. That unsettled people. But that's their burden to carry, not mine. A ripple went through the studio. It wasn't often that guests displayed such open disdain, and Cohen could sense the room tightening around her words. Break over. The heat rises again. When the show returned from its commercial pause, Meghan's smile was polished but stiff. She adjusted her blazer, posture rigid. Cohen, in contrast, seemed relaxed, his trademark cocktail in hand and a hint of mischief in his grin. "Welcome back," he said lightly, though his gaze was unflinching. "We're here with Meghan Markle. Before royalty and global headlines, you were an actress, best known for Suits. Do you ever miss that part of your career? The grind, the auditions, the unpredictability of Hollywood?" Her response came fast, almost dismissive. "Not at all. Acting was a stage I've outgrown. It was never the destination, just a means to something greater. What I'm building now carries far more weight than pretending to be a paralegal on screen ever could." The audience inhaled sharply at the bluntness. Cohen raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. A lot of people adored you on that show. Some might argue that role opened doors to everything else." Meghan gave a clipped laugh. "With all due respect, Andy, my identity isn't defined by a character I once played. If others see me only through that lens, it reflects their limitations, not mine." The condescension was undeniable, and the studio's energy shifted once again. The marriage question. Unmoved, Cohen steered toward the most delicate subject. "Let's talk about your marriage. You and Prince Harry have become a brand unto yourselves. With that comes endless speculation, rumours, strain, distance. Are you two really as unshakable as you say?" Meghan's features hardened. "Of course. Our relationship is solid. Gossip is just noise, and we don't waste our lives listening to noise. It's absurd that people think they know anything about what goes on in our home." Cohen leaned closer, his tone steady but insistent. "So, absolutely no truth to reports of tension. Between California life, the spotlight, your projects, none of it has tested your marriage." Her smile returned, icy this time. "Let me make it very simple. We are stronger than ever. If others invent fantasies about us, that speaks to their need for distraction, not to our reality." The audience sat in uneasy silence. What was meant to be late-night entertainment had become a battle of wills. Meghan fiercely defending her image, Andy Cohen unrelenting in his probing. Analysis and parallels. The exchange revealed a deeper struggle. Meghan's determination to redefine herself beyond the roles that shaped her, clashing with Cohen's insistence that those roles cannot be dismissed so easily. Similar moments have played out in celebrity history. Figures trying to shed the skins of past identities, often colliding with the public's unwillingness to forget. The Duchess holds her ground. Meghan Markle's defiance meets Andy Cohen's probing. Our reality is love, commitment, and partnership. That's it. End of story. Meghan Markle's voice rang out with finality. The audience stirred, though their reaction was subdued. Not applause, not cheers, just a low ripple of unease that seemed to mirror the tension on stage. Andy Cohen let the silence linger, sipping his cocktail with deliberate slowness before steering the conversation elsewhere. "Let's circle back to your time in the UK. The reception was complicated, adored by some, rejected by others. How do you see that now?" Race, tradition, and resistance. Meghan's eyes narrowed. It was prejudice, plain and simple. I disrupted their traditions. They wanted someone compliant, docile, willing to play the part. That was never me. And yes, racism played a role. Let's not pretend otherwise. The studio fell quiet. Cohen, keeping his tone measured, pushed back gently. Some critics argue it wasn't about race, but about your attitude. They suggest your choices, your demeanour, created friction. What do you say to that? Meghan didn't hesitate. That's the excuse people use when they want to mask bias. They say it's her attitude because admitting racism is harder. The truth is, I walked into a centuries-old machine that didn't know how to deal with someone like me. Instead of adapting, they made me the villain. Cohen tilted his head, smirk faintly visible. But do you think you bear any responsibility at all? Any reflection on whether your approach may have contributed? Leaning forward, Meghan's reply was icy. Responsibility for what? For being myself? For not bowing low enough? For not smiling on cue? If authenticity is a crime, then I'm guilty as charged. A soft gasp rose from the audience. Cohen swirled his drink, lips twitching upward. He had sparred with reality stars and politicians before, but Meghan's unyielding defiance was something else entirely. Privacy or publicity? Cohen shifted again, his voice smooth. One last question before the break. You've often said you left royal life in search of privacy. Yet, since then, Netflix deals, Spotify, a best-selling memoir, Oprah. How do you respond to those who call that contradictory? The word landed like a blow. Meghan's fingers tightened against the armrest, though her smile stayed fixed. Contradictory? No. Strategic. We decide what to share, when to share it, and why. That's not hypocrisy. That's survival. Her tone was sharp, almost cutting. Cohen gave a slow nod, setting down his glass. Strategic or not, it certainly keeps people talking. The tension in the room thickened. Meghan sat back, legs crossed, hands clasped tightly, her expression a silent challenge. Andy Cohen, unfazed, leaned casually on his desk, his notes resting loosely in his hand, that faint smirk refusing to leave his lips. Revisiting the Oprah interview. All right, Cohen began, voice light but eyes steady. Let's discuss one of the most famous interviews of the decade, your conversation with Oprah. Millions tuned in. But since then, some of the claims you made have been questioned. Meghan's jaw stiffened. Her smile remained, but the tension was visible. I stand by every word Harry and I shared in that interview. It was my truth. Cohen repeated the phrase, swirling his drink slowly. Your truth. You've used that expression often. But here's the thing. Truth is usually just truth. Facts, not perspectives. Her eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my honesty? He held her gaze. I'm questioning contradictions. For instance, you told Oprah you and Harry were married 3 days before the official ceremony. But the Archbishop of Canterbury himself clarified it wasn't legally binding, just a private exchange of vows. Do you see how that could come across as misleading? The audience shifted uneasily. Meghan's expression hardened further. The storm brewing in the Bravo studio was far from over. Context and comparison. This part of the interview exposed a recurring theme in Meghan's public battles, her insistence on controlling her own narrative colliding with outside skepticism. Cohen's questioning reflected the scrutiny that has followed her since her royal exit, echoing debates over whether her story is a fight for survival or a carefully managed performance. The exchange also recalled earlier celebrity moments, where public figures defended their truth against institutions and critics demanding cold facts, highlighting the enduring tension between personal experience and objective reality. The breaking point. Andy, Cohen corners, Meghan Markle. What Harry and I shared privately was sacred. Legal or not, the ceremony was ours, and that's what mattered. Meghan's words sliced through the silence, her body leaning forward, voice sharper now, the calm veneer slipping. Andy Cohen gave a slow nod, but his smile hardened. But that's not what you told Oprah. You said we were married before the wedding. Millions believed that. And when the Archbishop himself later contradicted it, that wasn't a minor detail. That was misleading. Meghan's nostrils flared. You're twisting my words. This is exactly how the British press operates, obsessing over fragments instead of acknowledging the trauma I endured. Cohen didn't raise his voice. His calmness made the tension worse. Let's take another example then. You said your keys and passport were taken, that you were trapped inside the palace, yet public records show you travelled, attended events, even went on vacations. How do you explain that? Gasps and murmurs rippled through the studio. Meghan shifted in her seat, her polished composure straining at the edges. Do you know what it's like to live inside a gilded cage? To appear in public doesn't mean you're free. Every move I made was controlled, every step monitored. You couldn't possibly understand. Andy let out a small, humorless chuckle. Maybe not. But I do recognise inconsistency. Sometimes you present yourself as powerless, other times as completely in control, depending on the interview. People notice that. Her eyes narrowed, irritation flashing. People notice what they want to notice. I won't apologise for telling my story. If the public can't handle nuance, that's on them, not me. Monetising the narrative. Andy's voice dropped, lower, sharper. So, when critics accuse you of monetising victimhood with Netflix, Spotify, and a memoir, are they just failing to grasp nuance too? The air in the room seemed to freeze. Meghan's lips pressed into a tight line before she fired back. That accusation is beneath you. We've built platforms to amplify the unheard, to spotlight causes that matter. That's not exploitation. That's service. Andy swirled his drink slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Service that also comes with million-dollar contracts, book deals, and glossy PR campaigns. Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say? Meghan leaned forward, her voice laced with contempt. Do you mock every guest who tries to make a difference? Or is it just me? Unmoved, Andy replied evenly. I don't mock. I hold people accountable, especially those who claim authenticity while playing by celebrity rules. The audience deserves the truth, Meghan, not just your truth. The audience audibly gasped. Meghan's face flushed, her hands gripping the armrests, the mask of calm control faltering. For the first time that evening, the Duchess looked rattled. Andy let the silence hang, sipping his cocktail as cameras zoomed in on Meghan's expression. Pale one moment, burning with anger the next. Then, almost casually, he added, Maybe it isn't the tabloids, or the monarchy, or Hollywood. Maybe, just maybe, the problem is you. The words struck like a hammer. Meghan's eyes widened, her jaw tightening, rage flickering just beneath the surface. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The audience sat frozen, sensing the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just late-night television anymore. It had turned into a public reckoning. The stage is set. When the show returned from break, Meghan sat rigid, blazer perfectly in place but her eyes blazing, betraying the effort it took to hold herself together. Andy leaned back, his notes in hand, smiling. Not with warmth, but with the confidence of someone who knew the balance of power had shifted. So, Meghan, he began, his voice almost conversational, but the steel underneath unmistakable. Context and comparison. This was no longer a standard celebrity Q&A. Cohen's unflinching questions mirrored the skepticism Meghan has faced since her Oprah interview. Scrutiny not just of her words, but of contradictions that critics seize on. For Meghan, the stakes were higher than a TV appearance. It was a battle to control her story in real time, while the world watched. Moments like this call back to famous confrontational interviews. Think Princess Diana's BBC revelations, or even political grillings where leaders faltered under tough questioning. The difference here? This wasn't a monarch or politician, but a woman determined to define her identity outside institutions, facing a host who refused to let her narrative go unchallenged. The final act, Andy Cohen pushes Meghan to the edge. The conversation, already tense, shifted into even more dangerous territory. Andy Cohen's tone was calm, but his words carried weight. "We've talked about your marriage, your career, even the Oprah interview. Let's turn to something harder. Perception. Many observers believe you've severed ties everywhere. Your father, your half-sister, palace staff, even friends you once relied on. Why do these rifts keep repeating?" Meghan's head snapped toward him. Her reply was sharp, nearly biting. "Because people sell me out, Andy. For headlines, for money, for clout. Every single time it's betrayal. That's on them, not me." Andy twirled the ice in his glass and let the silence hang. Then, almost gently, he asked, "So, none of this has anything to do with you? You're never the link between these broken relationships?" The audience reacted instantly. A wave of gasps and murmurs rippled across the studio. Meghan's lips pressed tight, her eyes narrowing. "I will not let you psychoanalyze me on national television. I've spent my life walking away from toxic environments and toxic people." Andy leaned forward now, his voice smooth but sharpened like a knife. "Or maybe, Meghan, anyone who refuses to accept your version of events becomes toxic." Her cheeks flushed. "That's insulting and sexist." Andy set his glass down deliberately, his expression steady. "No, this isn't sexism. It's accountability. If every falling out ends with you as the wronged party, perhaps the mirror is the place to start looking." The room froze. Meghan's hands clutched the chair so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her voice trembled with fury. "You don't know me. You have no idea what I've endured." Andy's smirk disappeared, replaced with something colder, more resolute. "I don't need to know you personally. Your story is written in the pattern. You were a capable actress with moderate success. You married into the most famous family in the world. And from that point forward, every grievance became a headline. Every conflict turned into content. You didn't build a brand on acting. You built it on who you married." Meghan inhaled sharply, eyes widening as though struck. "That's outrageous," she whispered. Andy didn't hesitate. His voice grew louder, cutting across the studio. "You call yourself a duchess, but you hold no position in the monarchy. You say you're independent, yet everything you have comes from that title. You claim to want privacy, yet you've sat for more interviews, podcasts, and documentaries than anyone else in that family. So I'll ask you directly, who are you without Harry's last name?" The studio erupted with shocked gasps. Meghan's mask cracked, her composure dissolved. Her eyes filled with tears as her voice wavered. "How dare you? After all I've survived, how dare you reduce me to—" Andy cut her off, voice like a hammer. "How dare you reduce everyone else, the Queen, William, Kate, into villains so you can play the perpetual victim? You weren't forced out, Meghan. You walked away. And ever since, you've monetized that walk." The cameras zoomed in as tears streaked down her cheeks. The Duchess, normally so polished and controlled, looked exposed, humiliated, furious, undone. Andy's voice softened, but his words carried more sting than ever. "You're jealous. Jealous of the admiration William and Kate inspire. Jealous of the stability they represent. They chose duty. You chose drama." Meghan shook her head violently, her voice cracking. "That's not true. That's not fair." Andy didn't blink. "Fair? Royal life has never been about fair. It's about duty, obligation, and sacrifice. And you, Meghan, you turned all of that into a business model, context, and comparison." What unfolded was no longer an interview. It was a public confrontation. Meghan Markle, who has fought to control her narrative for years, found herself cornered by Cohen's unrelenting pushback. The exchange echoed the most explosive television moments of past decades, where famous figures were forced to defend not just their choices, but their identities. The comparison to Princess Diana's BBC interview is inevitable, but here the tone was different. This wasn't about confession. It was about accountability. The walkout. Meghan Markle leaves the stage. A brand built on contradictions and controversy. That was the unspoken verdict hanging heavy in the air as Meghan Markle's composure finally shattered. Tears streaked her cheeks, her hands trembling as she tugged at her microphone, struggling to unclip it. The audience sat frozen, some leaning forward in shock, others exchanging uneasy glances, as the moment turned from interview to spectacle. "This is finished," Meghan choked out, her voice breaking with fury and humiliation. "I will not sit here and be torn apart like this." Andy Cohen didn't flinch. Reclining in his chair, his voice was steady, almost cold. "You're not being torn apart, Meghan. You're being revealed. That's not the same thing." She stood abruptly, the microphone clattering against the chair with a sharp crack that echoed through the studio. Her heels struck the floor in rapid succession as she marched toward the exit, shoulders stiff, jaw set. The cameras trailed her retreat until the curtain swallowed her figure whole. A studio left stunned. For a long moment, silence dominated the room. Then Andy turned back to the cameras, his expression controlled, unfazed. "Well," he said with deliberate calm, "that's certainly one way to wrap an interview." The studio erupted, not with a single reaction but a split chorus. Some applauded, impressed by his composure. Others murmured in disbelief, still trying to process what they had witnessed. Andy shuffled his notes into a neat stack, glanced down at his cocktail, and then looked directly into the lens. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Meghan Markle. We'll be right back." The theme music swelled, the lights dimmed, and the segment cut to commercial. But the air in the room made one thing clear. This conversation would not end with the broadcast. The fallout begins. Viewers knew they had just watched something extraordinary, one of the most explosive exchanges in late-night television history. But what lingered beyond the spectacle was the question of what it meant. Had Andy Cohen crossed a line, pressing so hard that the interview devolved into public humiliation? Or had Meghan Markle finally been confronted with the accountability she had spent years avoiding?